Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Society, officially located in East Brunswick, New Jersey. Today, coming to you from multiple locations throughout central New Jersey and everywhere. I'm Angela Pinero, today's worship associate and also the chair of the Sunday Services Committee, and I wish you a very happy new year. If you are new, a very special welcome to you. We hope you experience connection and compassion and even a sense of coming home. If you would like to learn more about the congregation, please sign up for our emails. The address is in the chat. Feel free to type into the chat where you are joining us from. Please use the chat as a way to engage, interact, and praise. Please ignore the chat if it is distracting. If you would like to use Zoom's real-time closed caption capability, you can control what you see on the screen by clicking on the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We hope you caught our announcements before the service started. I understand they were a little bit truncated. We'll try to sort that out before the offertory when they will be repeated. I have one other announcement to add. This Wednesday, January 6th, is the registration deadline for the Buddhist Meditation Retreat. The retreat will be held virtually on Saturday, January 16th from 9:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. To register, please email Jackie Held-Rubin at the address posted in the chat. After our Sunday services, there is a virtual coffee hour that we invite you to stay for, a great way to strengthen connections. And thank you today to our worship crew, Jonathan as our Zoom tech and Jessica as our chat chaplain. And though our music director, Nicholas Place, is off this Sunday, we are grateful that he has provided music for this service. And on that note, this is the first Sunday that we have neither Reverend Karen or Nick. And so we're kind of working through some technical issues, and I hope that you will have patience and openness in your heart for the imperfections of life. This morning, we welcome Reverend Molly Brewer to our pulpit. Reverend Molly uses "fey" and "fair" pronouns. She's an out and proud autistic minister currently serving remotely as the youth ministry coordinator at the First Unitarian Church of Rochester, New York, and as a facilitator for the UUA Leadership Lab's Retooling for New Realities program. Reverend Molly has served the UU congregation in Auburn, Maine as their ministerial intern, as a group facilitator with the Church of the Larger Fellowship, and has preached in UU congregations across the country. Faye lives in southern Maine with her husband and 2 cats. And now, let us join together in saying our bond of union, one of the founding documents of the congregation. The words are on your screen. In the spirit of community and service, we unite in the quest for those values that give our lives deeper meaning and spiritual satisfaction, reserving to each individual the right to their own beliefs as to the nature of God and the universe. And now, I invite you to light your at-home chalice to join its flame with this one and with the virtual flame of the chalice in our sanctuary, a light in dark times, a beacon of hope in hard times, and a symbol of resistance against evil.
Welcome everyone into this sacred space that we create with our words, with our music, with our collective thoughts. Let us be here in this place together where every movement is sacred, every body and every mind sacred. Let us be joined in that union that joins us one to each. Let us remember that there are always new ways of looking at community, looking at one another, and of seeing the gifts that are truly lying within each of us. Let us worship together. I invite you now to join me in singing our opening hymn, number 345, "With Joy We Claim the Growing Light." The lyrics will be at the bottom of your screen. I would invite any of our children who are with us today, or anyone who's really just feeling young at heart, to sort of come and gather around in this communal space for our time for all ages. This story is called Tiny the God, and it comes to us from Becky Brooks. Once upon a time, there was a tiny little itty bitty, very small, tiny little god named Tiny. She lived her life hearing stories of all the big gods. And well, let's face it, she was jealous. She knew she needed to think of some special kind of spark of an idea that would make her existence meaningful. After watching humans for a long time, she hit upon something that just might work, something to make people think, yeah, that Tiny really has got a good thing going. This was it. This was going to make her famous. Ready? Here it is. You are not alone. She took the form of a very light breeze, and in a voice so quiet, each person heard it only in their mind, she said, "You are not alone. You are not alone." People loved it. It was perfect because who doesn't want to hear that? Pretty soon, Tiny was comforting people all over with "You are not alone." Every evening, she took the form of the breeze and whispered it in people's minds, until one day she encountered someone who wasn't comforted at all. When Miriam heard Tiny's words in her head, instead of feeling comforted, she felt agitated. Something was just kind of off about it. She kept saying to herself over and over again, "You are not alone. You are not alone." She tossed and turned. She couldn't sleep. In the morning, she went to read the paper, and instead of skimming everything, she found herself drinking in every single story. She was only halfway through when she found herself crying. "I am not alone," she said. "I am connected to every one of these people. They live in my town and my country and my world. They love their children like I love mine. They're scared sometimes, and so am I. They hurt like I hurt. I am not alone. I can help." Tiny was surprised. It hadn't occurred to her that someone might think of it that way. Tiny kept watch over Miriam to monitor this interesting development. Miriam and a coworker met online in a meeting and talked about a law they hoped the Senate would pass. And Tiny noticed when Miriam wrote a letter to her senator about it right away. She noticed that when Miriam turned in her grocery order, she bought a few extra things for her neighbor and left them with a colorful note on their porch. She noticed that Miriam had tears in her eyes when she joined in her congregation's worship on her computer, and she heard her favorite hymn through the small speakers. Miriam got out her phone and made an extra donation to her congregation. Tiny watched as Miriam wrote postcards to friends and family near and far, waved to the dog walkers who passed by her house, and strung up colorful lights in her living room window. But most importantly for Tiny, she noticed when Miriam received a phone call one evening from a friend that she hadn't heard from in a very long time. His voice was shaking. "I'm having a hard time," he said. He started to tell her about his troubles, but he began to cry. Miriam got herself comfortable in her favorite chair. "Take your time. I'll stay on the line with you. You are not alone. I am here." "I am here." Tiny heard those words like an echo in her mind. "You are not alone. I am here. You are not alone. I am here." And in the comfort of your own home, you can say this along with me. "You are not alone. I am here." In that moment, Tiny knew that she was nothing without Miriam's hands and heart and spirit. And she knew that what she wanted, what the world needed more than anything, was what Miriam had learned to give. So Tiny went to work. Instead of just spending her evenings spreading the gospel of you are not alone, she spent her night times doing it too, and her mornings and her afternoons. And pretty soon, she was spending every moment doing it until she became the breeze itself. And that is why there are no paintings of Tiny, no busts or holy books, just a breeze, a low voice, and many, many helping hands, loving hearts, and caring spirits. You can hear the echo if you listen closely, and you can repeat with me, you are not alone. I am here. You are not alone. I am here. When water bottles are left in the desert for those who risk their lives to cross it, you are not alone. I am here. At the bedside of a sick person, you are not alone. I am here. In the jailhouse and the sanctuary, you are not alone. I am here. Separate and together, you are not alone. I am here. May it be so.
Thank you, Reverend Molly. It's great. That's a great message. This morning's reading is the poem Telling by Laura Hershey. What you risk telling your story, you will bore them. Your voice will break, your ink spill and stain your coat. No one will understand. Their eyes become fences. You will park yourself forever on the outside, your differentness once and for all revealed, dangerous. The names you give to yourself will become epithets. Your happiness will be called bravery, denial. Your sadness will justify their pity. Your fear will magnify their fears. Everything you say will prove something about their God or their economic system. Your feelings that change day to day, kaleidoscopic, will freeze in place, brand you forever, justify anything they decide to do with you. Those with power can afford to tell their story or not. Those without power risk everything to tell their story and must. Someone, somewhere, will hear your story and decide to fight, to live and refuse compromise. Someone else will tell her own story, risking everything.
What does it mean to be kin to one another? Right now, while our socializing is curtailed by the need for safety, kin may not look like the nuclear family of relatives in years past, but sort of a quarantine of chosen kin. Our kin may be people that we know only through typed words conveyed across screens from many miles apart, people that we've never met in person, but with whom we still share a bond. Our kin may be as close as someone sleeping in bed next to us, or they may be many time zones away. Unitarian Universalists, many of us who journeyed away from the traditions of our youth to find community together as adults, many of us who may visit a community gathering some weeks and a church service the next, may understand this expansive sense of one's kin better than most. But as we know, sometimes our sense of kin, the desire to knit together, to join as one, to weave our souls, can create such a tight fabric that it leaves no room to flex and to change as our sense changes of who our kin actually are. In Christianity, the idea of the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven is supreme in both hearts and minds. Latina theologian Ada Maria Isasi Diaz has referred to this prophesied utopia not as a kingdom, but rather a kingdom. In her framework, this kingdom is able to unfold only because we undertake the responsibility to make justice and liberation a reality. For Isasi Diaz, the kingdom of heaven is not a world of power and exploitation, but looks to the idea of kin, family, whether chosen or by chance, and shared experience as a fertile field for planting seeds of justice and equity. So let's try and experiment and share an experience. I know that we're not in a room together, but we can still make this a participatory experience if we want to. Right now, I am just going to move a little bit in a way that makes my nervous system and my body feel good. And I would invite you to do this along with me. Whatever movements, whether this is stomping your feet or kind of flapping your hands or tapping your face and kind of doing this, flapping and waving and kind of shaking it out. I promise there is a reason for this. To borrow a phrase from C.B. Beale, who is one of my favorite UU religious educators, I am a neurological turducken. I've lived with both depression and anxiety for many years. They're the chicken and the duck. And so my own mental health takes a little more maintenance than other people's, but it wasn't until years after the onset of those conditions that I figured out, with the help of a specialist, that there is actually a turkey outside of this chicken stuffed duck. I have been neurodivergent, that is different from what we would call the neurological norm, for my entire life. As a child, I was a fastidious eater. I was sensitive to textures, gradations of flavor and smell, far beyond what the adults around me seemed to be able to perceive. Wearing clothes with seams, nylon, hair ornaments activated my nerves into kind of a jangle of discomfort. It felt like I was somehow uniquely uncomfortable in the world. But I couldn't imagine that all the people in my life had just grown out being sensitive to it. And my many years of being told that my senses were lying to me, that I couldn't trust how my body felt, and that other people's ways of interacting with each other that seemed nonsensical to me was really just normal and that I would get used to it, led to autistic burnout when I became an adult. Because when I was an adult, I found out that I was autistic. I share these experiences not because I am special. In fact, I share these experiences precisely because I'm not special. I'm not unusual. According to statistics from the National Alliance on Mental Illness, in an average year, about 20% of American adults will experience some form of mental illness. That doesn't even include those who have neurological or developmental conditions such as autism or ADHD. And that's 1 in 5 people. Because of the effect of the extended pandemic and lockdown, those numbers are continuing to go up and are going to continue to rise in the near future. This is not an abstract or small demographic. Even if this label, this idea of being neurodivergent or having a mental illness doesn't describe you, this is still who we are. Unitarian Universalism is already a neurodiverse community. The term neurodiversity was coined by autistic self-advocates and has since become widely adopted by communities of accessibility activists, such as Laura Hershey, who wrote our our reading earlier that we heard. The neurodiversity paradigm asserts that there are many inherent and natural types of human cognition. Just as there are many different ways of having a physical body, one can be tall or short or fat or thin, dark or light skinned, deaf or blind or hearing or sighted. There are many ways of processing the world neurologically. Neurodiversity means the vast and bountiful world of brain functions and types that make up our kingdom. People with or without mental illness, with learning disabilities, with cognitive differences, or autism spectrum conditions. Developmental differences and mental illness are not the same thing, but all of these conditions exist as naturally occurring expressions of human neurodiversity. And those of us who are neurodivergent will sometimes refer to our neurokin, those with whom we share an experience of perception, even if all of our traits and behaviors aren't exactly the same. An understanding of neurodiversity, all of the different and beautiful brains and neurokin among us, can help us identify, appreciate, and lift up the gifts of our people in new and exciting ways. There are people among us in this community and sharing this Zoom room who live every day conditions like post-traumatic stress or schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or who consider themselves neurokin in some way. This has been true of every congregation I have ever preached at, ministered to, or visited. I know this because I am one of them. Some of us feel safe being open about this part of ourselves, and some of us, understandably, do not. There are still people who denigrate and demean those of us who live with one or more of these atypicalities. Autism, for example, is still treated as pathology in many circles. Autistic children are sometimes taught not to interact with others like us for fear that it would exacerbate the behavior that society sees as a problem. These directives are as old as mistaken ideas about the condition itself. Likewise, there is still fear and stigma around mental health conditions. It's no surprise to anyone here that the United States public health infrastructure is beyond broken. Disparities in access to healthcare and quality of care cut across lines of race and ethnicity, class, spoken language, and even body size. Outpatient mental health therapy, let alone adult assessment for developmental conditions that may have been missed in childhood, is viewed by many insurance plans as a luxury. The emergency room is always available to those having acute mental health crises and who fear hurting themselves or others, but this is prohibitively expensive for most. People with untreated symptoms or traits read as undesirable by the dominant culture become likely to experience poverty, homelessness, unemployment, and discrimination. Not only that, people who cope with the everyday marginalization of racism, ableism, sexism, queer and transphobia, and other forms of prejudice are statistically likelier to live with mental illness because experiencing discrimination and marginalization creates a greater strain. These groups are no more inherently predisposed to neurological difference or mental illness than others. But because of prejudice, their barriers to treatment for mental illness may be far higher. But this isn't actually a talk about public policy, as much as it might seem like it's going in that direction. I am speaking to you as a community of faith. I'm speaking to you as someone who supports your mission and work to be welcoming to all, not only a few. So, what is it that's knocking at the door of our kingdom, that is asking to be welcomed in? What is the experience we need to share in order to allow the kingdom to unfold? What we need to create in our faith communities is an expanded vision of ministry, one that looks among us, our own communities, sees the neurodiversity that is already here, and harnesses it as a strength. To do this, we must equip ourselves to listen and to learn, to respect and to honor, to set healthy boundaries, and to call each other kindly into accountability. In short, we need to agree to live in kingdom, in loving covenant with those among us who live with mental illness and who experience cognitive and social difference. And so, with the help of our faith's grounding in covenantal community, we are already on our way to making the kingdom real for those of us with these differences. Spirit of life and of love, spirit of community and connection, spirit of new discoveries and shared sorrows. We call out to you this day. From each of our hearts, we call to that aspect of you which is closest to our understanding of shared community, shared divine. If we call you by the name God, we know that you will answer. If we call you by the name humanity, we know too that you will answer. If we see you in the connection of our faces across many miles and across screens, we know that you are present and that you are there. Together, let us give thanks for these things that give us joy, that make us feel seen, that help us rejoice in new things that we learn about ourselves. Help us rejoice in these goals that we have made and that we have met in spite of so many obstacles in this last year. Help us to let go of the sorrows that have surfaced within the last year. And let us hold tenderly those sorrows that still exist for us. For those places that we feel blocked, for those places that there is no further help for us, for those places where we feel as though there is nowhere further that we can reach. Let us hold them with great tenderness and gentleness within this strong, established circle of care. Let us know that we are here for one another, that none of us is alone. Help us to recognize the ways in which we have caused problems for ourselves and others. Let us be reminded of those times when we have misunderstood something that someone was so clearly trying to communicate to us. And let us hold that with tenderness too. For all of these things, we can forgive ourselves, we can forgive one another, and sometimes even we can forgive the world for its cruelty to us. We hold all of these truths, all of these sacred, difficult, complex, contradicting truths, and we weave them together in this web of care that will catch each of us as we fall. Let us remember that our sacred duty right now is to hold our corner of the web, to hold it tightly so that whoever falls can be caught by its steady care and its steady presence. For gratitude, for sadness, for sorrows, we thank you, Spirit. For pains, for joys, for healings, for new arrivals, we thank you. We hold all of these truths, and let us be reminded that they are always within our web of care. Amen, and blessed be.
Sing in my heart.
In the spirit of generosity, we will now take up this morning's offering. We invite you to use the link in the chat to give this Sunday morning as part of what we call Be the Change, turning what was once the change in our pockets into the change we want to see in the world. This week's recipient is ASAN, Autistic Self Advocacy Network. ASAN works to empower autistic people across the world to take control of their own lives and the future of their common community. ASAN's mission is nothing about us without us, and thus seeks to organize the autistic community to ensure their voices are heard in the national conversation about them. You can learn more about ASAN at the website in the chat. And while we know that online giving is convenient, we ask you to not use it for making pledge payments. Please make your pledge payments by check or bank draft, not online, as we lose 3% in fees, which we just cannot afford. We appreciate your understanding. May your generosity heal the world and strengthen your heart.
So earlier, I had said that I promise the movements we were doing would make sense a little bit later. And I realized that I didn't actually go back to that. So now let's circle back around. And part of the reason that we do these movements, or that I did these movements with you, was to show you a little bit of how autistic people regulate our own systems. We sometimes will move in ways that seem unusual to other people, that make us look as though we're nervous or like we're not paying attention to you. We are totally paying attention to you. And in fact, I wonder whether any of you were experiencing that kind of lightness, whether or not you identify as being on the spectrum or having ADHD or anything else. I wonder whether you felt some of that release and some of that lightness from flapping and the stomping and the head shaking. And if you do, I would ask you to remember only that everyone does these kinds of things to self-soothe. It's just that for some of us, it looks a little bit different, which is our first clue that when we're calling forth the ministries of others in our community, we have to do it with great respect for their gifts and talents and interests. And it might have to look a little bit different for us to respect the gifts of our neurodivergent kin. And one of the most important things that we can do is to listen and believe and create safety through respect. Neurodivergent people are resilient. And in community, we're sharing new ideas about ourselves all the time, if only the larger culture would tune in and listen. Our boundaries may occur at different thresholds from others, but they need to be respected as much as anyone's. Our way of expressing empathy, joy, or struggle may not look the same as it does coming from others. That doesn't mean that we don't feel those things. In September 2019, the Unitarian Universalist Association encouraged UUs around the country to join in a global general strike for climate action in solidarity with 16-year-old Greta Thunberg, whose image I didn't share with you in this service, but in another iteration of this service, I do share a picture of her. She is very stern looking. Many of you have probably seen photos of her. And there has been a lot of commentary about how her face always looks so serious. But that is an expression of part of what makes her so good at pinpointing these issues. She names that those of her generation are going to bear the greatest pain and tragedy from the coming ecological catastrophe. Our own UU youth have stakes in this fight, and they've urged wide participation in the strike. And it's impossible to talk about Greta's clarity of purpose and conviction and her gift for bluntly cutting to the heart of matters, or her mature grasp of the facts and figures of climate change, and yes, her facial expressions, without mentioning that she is autistic. Her truth telling, her willingness to speak prophecy as warning and call to action is ministry. As a people who seek wisdom in many traditions, sources, and voices, we do well to respect her ministry. My understanding of my own tides of mental health and unrest have always been deeply tied to my sense of ministry. When I first found my way to a Unitarian Universalist community, it was that church that accepted me as part of their kingdom. Instead of telling me that I was too different or awkward or unsociable, they called me forth into my gifts instead. They listened to what I said. They believed what I told them, and they respected me enough to tell me their truth in return. Coming out to my home church as living with mental illness, which I did as a lay preacher, was hugely important in my shift to an ability to claim the work that I was called to do. It was my church that taught me how to live as part of a kingdom, to celebrate my own neurodivergent gifts, and to bring them with me into ministry. If this is true for me, it could be true of anyone else, because as I have said, I am not special and I am not unusual. This is the power that an affirming, welcoming, and supportive faith community can offer to the whole of its neurodiverse population, but especially could offer to its neurodivergent members. The symptoms of mental illness and the lack of accessibility experienced by those with learning and social differences truly can cause us to suffer, but in the right environment, these diversities of thought, the rumination and empathy of depression and anxiety, the hyper focus of ADHD, the pattern finding and truth telling clarity of people on the autism spectrum can become sources of deep caring, creativity, and passion. The diversity in our community strengthens us and makes us a resilient and strong people. If we listen to those experiencing these difficulties and equip ourselves to meet these needs, we become open to the incredible gifts offered by their strength and courage and persistence. These voices are a powerful force for justice, for inclusion, and for love. The ministry of Unitarian Universalism is not, nor has ever been, only for the well, or the happy, or the functional. In beginning to have conversations about how to serve and support our neurodivergent comrades in faith, we are already growing toward this glorious expansion. Our ministry is a vast yet intimate one that extends the circle of love wide and that takes in all. When we see a need among us, we can rise to meet it. Learning new ways to practice empathy and understanding, especially toward those whose behavior we're primed to see as challenging, can feel scary at first. In the words of actress Carrie Fisher, who lived with bipolar disorder and substance addiction and became an advocate and activist for those with mental illness, stay afraid, but do it anyway. What's important is the action. You don't have to wait to be confident. Just do it, and eventually the confidence will follow. In faith community at its best, hearts are poured out and shored up. Eyes are opened and bodies are readied. In gathering together, we create not kingdom, but kindom. But whose minds and bodies do we deem worthy of sharing in our space? Are we giving in to the lie told to us by supremacy culture that only some are worthy to be part of our kingdom? Or do we instead have the courage to reject the fear of that which is divergent? Dare we share a vision of a world transformed into a liberative neuro-kingdom? Balanced on the precipice of midday, we have gathered. May we be reminded that each day is as a precipice, the exciting cusp of new beginnings. As we greet these possibilities, let us shake, and I invite you to shake with me. Let us stamp and twirl and twiddle. Let us move in whatever ways feel comfortable to us, knowing that each movement we make maintains our balance in this precarious moment. Like the feet and hands of a skilled dancer, each movement speaks volumes and each movement has meaning. In this shared space where we find our kin and our kingdom, let us see, let us hear how these movements speak our kingdom into being. Amen and blessed be. I invite you now to sing with me the words of hymn number 1014, Answering the Call of Love.
Promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide, and so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our heart is our guide. We are answering the call of love, hands joined together, hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound, corrupted by fear, unwilling to denying the beauty we found. We are answering the call of love, hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. We are answering the call of love.
Our closing words today come from the Reverend Naomi King, who is herself disabled and lives with a chronic illness. She writes this piece in respect of the Pride rainbow, but it's also important to note that neurodiversity activists have also used rainbow colors as a way of acknowledging the entire spectrum of what we bring to the world. Somos una gente del arco iris. We are a rainbow people. The rainbow is an arc of light brilliantly displaying all of the colors of the visible spectrum, all the colors that combine to make the astounding beauty of our world, all the colors that combine to reflect the astounding diversity of human expression. Nous sommes des peuples d'arc-en-ciel. We are red people who respect others. We are orange people who offer faith and kind treatment. We are yellow people yearning for learning. Somos una gente del arco iris. We are green people who grow in our search for truth and meaning. We are blue people who believe in what we are achieving. We are indigo people insisting on freedom, love, and peace. We are violet people, valuing the web that does not cease and we did not create. Nous sommes des peuples des arc-en-ciel. Unitarian Universalism shows up, refracted through thousands of different human expressions and experiences, through individuals living our promises, through covenanted communities, through our associations and our actions. We are a rainbow people. Together, what we give heals and transforms our world. This is our covenant, our bridge of heaven, our dream, and our reality. The flame of the chalice lit around our world is the source of light and the pot of gold at the end of that rainbow. The flame of that chalice is filled with the light we bring and nurtured by our hopes and our dreams. We know the rainbow begins with you and with me. For somos una gente del arco iris. Nous sommes des peuples des arc-en-ciel. We are a rainbow people. Let us grow the rainbow again today.
Thank you very much to our guests, Reverend Molly Brewer, for a wonderful, enlightening, and inspirational service, and for leaving us with a re-envisioning of the Roy G. Biv that we all learned, most of us learned in elementary school. And a special thanks to our worship team. I think that was probably the fastest learning curve I ever saw. I think we ended really, really strong. And to all of you, very happy New Year. After service, I hope you will stay for virtual coffee hour. It's another way to keep our connections going. And now, please join me in saying the words that are on your screen as we extinguish our chalice and bring this morning's Sunday service to a close. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Have a great week and a wonderful 2021, everyone.